Hello everyone, my name is Hannah and welcome to the video. Today I am sharing with you a digital speed paint process of one of my favorite pieces I have ever made, and it is a mashup of two of my favorite things that have ever existed on this planet Earth. One being the Nintendo Switch, which you can see here. I didn't film the sketch process of that though because it was a little bit boring, but the other is Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit or Middle-earth or anything Tolkien related. I feel this piece is more inspired by The Hobbit than anything else because it kind of has the go on an adventure vibe, and I actually put a little text box in later, just like Nintendo video games have sometimes, and it's like, go on an adventure? Yes? No? Which one are you gonna pick? Obviously you're gonna pick yes, but I kind of wanted to put that in because I wanted to be a little bit more obvious if the Hobbit hole wasn't already obvious that this was Middle Earth, this was Hobbiton, this was the world of Tolkien. Now, as for the actual sketch process or the digital art process, this definitely isn't a tutorial. However, I will discuss with you kind of my process and how I digitally paint and make digital art. And you'll probably notice the first off the bat that I am not using the Photoshops or the Procreates, and that's just because Autodesk Sketchbook is free. I am not sponsored by them, but I do like their program, and after over a year of using it, I have found it quite easy. But again, I've had to use it for over a year to really get an understanding of it because there isn't as many tutorials online as for Procreate or Photoshop. So in terms of my digital painting process, I obviously start with a sketch layer, which you saw, which is in the green, and that is super messy. And for me, a sketch layer is really just about getting the composition of a piece, and then I go straight into line art. I rarely do more than one sketch layer unless I've got some details that I really need to figure out. Otherwise, I just jump straight into line art, and that's what you can see me doing in the blue. This window specifically, I actually spent quite a while on because it just, like, the shape that I drew in the sketch just wasn't working in the line art, and it kind of ended up changing its shape and the height and the width and even this position of the window quite a lot. But what I love about this piece is that I was able to just copy it over and move it to the other side, and there we go, because I wanted a very symmetrical sort of look and kind of almost a wide angle lens look as well, with like the curving of the floorboards, just because I thought it would be quite beautiful. And the photo reference that I was using, which is actually from Bag End in Hobbiton, is sort of on a wide angle lens, and it kind of stretches out those edges, so I kind of wanted to recreate that. I will have a link to my pin board where you can see my references that I've used for this video, and I'm planning to have all my future references that I use, that I don't know what they are yet, but I will have references up for all my future videos. Anything that I create and I use references for, I will put those references in that particular pinboard. That'll always be linked down below, just so you can see, and perhaps you can make some art for yourself from those same references. As for the line art in the landscape, I found it quite difficult and had to refer to a few references and other artists who do a lot of landscapes or cartoony looking landscapes or comic books in a fantasy setting, and I will link those artists below, as well as have some of those references in that Pinterest board. When it comes to creating a comic book or cutesy style of a landscape, I really struggle with creating detail and shapes, so I really spent a long time in figuring out how the shapes work, how to create organic shapes that also still look like landscape but don't just look like a children's drawing. And I'm actually really happy with the process and feel a little bit more confident in creating backgrounds and landscapes in digital art as well now, because I feel like the vibe came across. You can see that they're bushes, and you can see that they're trees, and you can see that that's grass. Probably the only thing that I would go back and change if I could be bothered to is the little trees off in the distance that you'll see me sketch in a moment. They're just blobs, and I didn't know how to position them or how many I should do. I didn't want to have too many. They kind of just look like blobs. I didn't remove them, but they didn't really work. So now you can see the little text bubble that I decided to put in, and it's go on an adventure, very much inspired by Bilbo as he's running away from his house going, I'm going on an adventure. However, in the book, he's a little bit more hesitant, so that's why I wanted to give that option, yes or no, because he is like, should I go? I don't know, this is scary. I have such a beautiful home, but like also I want an adventure, but also I don't want to die. So I kind of wanted to put that option in there. So this kind of piece is a little bit more inspired by The Hobbit than The Lord of the Rings. Moving on to the colouring aspect of the painting. Colouring isn't my favourite thing in the world. I find it quite boring because all the creative, composition and sketching is kind of done, and now I'm just kind of filling it in with the bucket tool because, I don't have time for that. In terms of colouring, I first colour the flats and I just fill in all the spaces on separate layers. So each colour has their own layer. The orange for the beams, they are on one layer. The wall, yellow, is on one layer. The only thing that's all on the same layer is the landscape, and that's because I was trying to be really, really organic and have a lot of fun because I really didn't know how to paint this section. So it was a lot easier for me to just do it all on one layer, and then I could just change it very easily without having to worry about the technical side of the program too much, because that's kind of one thing that I struggle with digital art, is that I get very stuck in changing the settings and worrying about the layers that I don't make art, I don't create. And that's a reason I prefer traditional art, but really want to kind of push through that and create better digital art that's fun to create as well, and I'm not like stressed afterwards. I was going to put some landscape in the windows, but decided against it because I wanted this very, end of the day, the lights coming through very harshly, dusk sort of vibe. And so I wanted it to look like it was so bright outside and the sun was so bright that the windows were just like reflecting against itself. And also I couldn't be bothered doing a landscape outside the windows. So that's why it's just yellow. But I think I hide that well by adding a glow layer later, which I'm very happy with and I'm very excited to show you guys. So the colors for the Switch are very inspired by the Switch Lite colors. I know that they're yellow, blue and white, but I went for a green, and I really, really wish that they made a green Switch Lite or even just a green Switch, because I love the color green and I love plants, and I feel like that would be very fun to play Stardew Valley on a green Switch. When I do my shadow layer, again, each color is on their own separate layer. I think this piece had up to about 50 layers on it when it comes to all the coloring layers and all the line art layers. But instead of using a flat round brush or the bucket tool, because sometimes I'm lazy, I also use a textured flat hard brush, which has a textured edge, but it fills in the color full. And that's because I like my shadows to have a little bit more texture. And also I will be adding even more texture with a soft textured brush later on. So this is where I start kind of thinking about the shadows and thinking about where they are. And I changed the position of the shadows quite a lot in this piece because I really wanted that very like the lights coming through and hitting at the end of the day effect. And so I've never really done such harsh shadows before. So I really was kind of experimenting with that and working with the reference image as well, because the reference image had that really harsh shadows. In the reference image, the door isn't even green, it's almost black or brown. Perhaps it was a different hobbit hole, but I really wanted it to be baggin, so I made it green. For the outside, because it doesn't have intense shadows or the sun isn't being blocked by a wall, I used my soft textured brush to create the shadows on the plants, and that also gave me a little bit more of a blending ability, as I could control the flow of that brush rather than it just being a hard brush. And I'm able to build up in a more traditional sense, or in the sense that I am more used to. I am definitely more used to using a dry brush on wet gouache to blend different colors together, and this kind of made it feel a little bit more natural for me. Digital art isn't my forte, isn't my strong point, but I'm really trying to figure out ways to make digital art comfortable for me. So you might be like, oh, that's not how I do that at all. But I don't know, everyone has different ways to do things, and perhaps we can learn from each other. Also, with the colors that I use for the highlights and the shadows in the landscape, I just picked from the rest of the painting. So on the dark part of the grass, I was like, I'm gonna pick a lighter color from further up to try and give that cohesiveness. I really tried with my color theory in this one, really tried to make this the perfect color theory. It's not perfect, but it is a lot better than what I've done in the past, and I think color theory is something that you just have to practice. I wanted to feel like those hills were like moving and rolling like they were in the picture. So that's why I added so many different layers and so many different colors, and wanted those colors to peek through. And also I wanted to blend that blue and yellow sky out, because I wanted that stark contrast of the sun, coming down in the light of the day, but also the sky is still blue. It's not quite dusk yet. Then for shading, I use that same soft round brush to soften up those edges even more, like I mentioned, of the inside of the hobbit hole, because probably in a video game it would be a bit more pixel art. However, for my art style particularly, I really like softer edges. I'm not so interested in half edges. To be honest, I do actually want to try pixel art. I'd love to create some pixel art. Particularly, I think it would be cute to create some hobbit pixel art, because I love hobbits so much. I think they're like the most beautiful creatures ever, but they don't even exist in real life, so I'm sad. And this is where you can see I am completely changing my shadow idea and removing a huge section of the shading, because I really, really wanted to have more shadow in the piece and more light in the piece as well. And as you can see there, the rug that I never showed any process of, I completely removed. So that's why I decided not to show any process of, and I filled in the floor. And instead of doing the rug, I decided to do this really stark contrast on the floor with a shadow and the light coming through the door. Removing the rug also helped to simplify the image and simplify my color theory. The main reason I didn't like it is because I didn't know how to color it, and I didn't know what colors to use. The rug in the reference image was kind of red and blue, but it was a little bit more pastel, and I just didn't know how to pair it all together. And yes, I could have color dropped, but also I just didn't like it. There was too much detail in it, and I'm like, this is a video game. I don't think that there's going to be too much detail in it. So we're slowly moving towards the end of the piece, and this is where I was like, I need a glow layer. I need to make this contrast intense. So I ended up using a glow layer and creating these really intense highlights all along the shadows that are kind of golden and sparkly, using a soft textured brush with the flow really far apart, so you can see kind of speckles and it's kind of magical. However, this did create a problem for the text bubble, because the no was in the really bright section, so the no was really bright, and the yes is in the dark section, and the yes was really dark. So that kind of created an issue, which you'll see later, but I try and fix that. And then I almost forgot that I probably should do some details on the switch. So I just wanted to be really simple, because I didn't want the switch to take away from my piece that I worked really, really hard on. So I didn't want to do too much, but I just made those buttons stand out and pop a little bit against the other color, making them feel a little bit more three-dimensional, and added some shadows down the bottom and around the screen. So this is where I'm adding back in that text bubble, and I'm kind of experimenting with which blending layer I should put it on. I can't remember exactly which blending layer I did put it on, but I was really struggling with the color of the text, and trying to make it stand out. Perhaps I should have gone with capital letters because it would have been easier to read, but I didn't like the capital letters and I couldn't be bothered making up my own font at this point. So trying to highlight the yes a little bit more, I went and outlined the bubble and also outlined the arrow, because then it's like, oh, well, if you're selecting yes, then, it's outlined. Let me know if you are interested in seeing more of these sorts of concepts and ideas being displayed in front of you with my voice talking about them. I hope you have a lovely day, and I will see you in my next video, whenever that is. I don't know when it will be, but hopefully soon if enough of you like this, and subscribe and stuff. I don't know how to be a YouTuber. Anyway, I'm gonna go now. Bye.